Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Joe's Hot Takes 25. This is season 1, episode 8. We're going to talk about transgender and physicality. So, welcome to Joe's Hot Takes 25. I'm your host. I'm Joe. It's great to have you listening in. This is a podcast that focuses on asking questions and provoking thoughts. Today, we're diving into a topic that has generated significant debate: transgender individuals and the physical differences between genders from birth. So the questions that we're going to have to ask here is, what are the biological differences? So we need to understand what we're even talking about. Should transgender women, this would be born male and trans to female, be allowed to play in women's sports? Do they have an unfair advantage? What about female to male transgender athletes? Can they perform at the same physical standards as their male counterparts? Let's explore some facts based on some research, and then let's ask some questions. All right, let's get started here. So I think it's important first we have to look at the physiological differences between the genders. So in context of transgender athletes, significant differences in body composition, primarily due to exposure to, and this is really important, testosterone during puberty. Testosterone during puberty. So primarily due to exposure to testosterone during puberty, play a key role in athletic performance and the debate surrounding inclusion in sports. So let's look at about 5 different factors here. Factor number 1 would be muscle mass and strength. So males, due to testosterone exposure during puberty, typically have greater muscle mass and strength, leading to advantages in sports requiring power and endurance. So as males are growing into and through puberty, that exposure to that testosterone really sets a standard of how your body is going to grow and perform. It definitely has an effect. So let's look at bone density now. Testosterone contributes to greater bone density in males. That can provide an advantage in sports involving impact and force. So stronger, more dense bones, heavier. So certainly that can be a factor. Cardiovascular and respiratory capacity. Males often have larger hearts and lungs and higher hemoglobin concentration, leading to better oxygen circulation and endurance. So that makes sense, especially think about distance running, cycling, swimming. Larger heart, larger lungs, you're able to cycle your oxygen better and circulate it and perfuse your organs better, probably, than someone with smaller lungs, smaller hearts. Let's talk about height and limb length. Males are generally taller with longer limbs, which can be an advantage in sports where reach and leverage matter. Size of your hands, the size of your feet, the length of your arms, all big factors. Imagine swimming, just the size of a hand cupping that water and pulling back, mixed in with the larger heart and lung capacity, the longer reach, and the density, the muscle density. You should be able to stroke through your swims much stronger than a female competitor. It appears. The last real big factor I think to bring up now would be body fat percentage. So males typically have lower body fat percentages, and that can contribute to higher power to weight ratio. So more muscle mass, more bone density, more weight, less body fat. All of these things can really contribute to athletes. And I think we can all agree that when you stand a man and a woman next to each other and you look at them, you see the differences. You see height differences, differences in the length of the arms and legs, muscle mass. We see the differences. So it's really hard to understand what's really inside the body. We see it on the outside, but let's understand what's on the inside. So let's talk about how this can impact transgender athletes. And I think first let's talk about transgender women, which would be male to female. So those who have undergone male puberty retain many of these physiological advantages, even after hormone therapy, which is generally estrogen. So even with hormone therapy trying to bring down the levels of testosterone, what we're seeing through this research is that those who have undergone male puberty, so we talked about the testosterone and during puberty that these males develop and grow with, they retain. And they retain many of these physiological advantages, and those advantages are things such as heart and lung capacity, bone density, muscle density, things like that, muscle mass. So estrogen therapy reduces muscle mass and strength, but what they're finding, it sounds like, is it's reducing muscle mass and strength, but not to the level of a cisgender female. So even if we can bring down the testosterone levels through hormone therapy, we still may not be able to get it down to the level of a cisgender female. So the legacy effects of testosterone exposure can persist in aspects such as bone structure, lung size, hand and foot proportions, things like that. So no matter what we do, we can't change those things. Even with hormone therapy, we're probably not going to make bone density less, bone structure less, heart and lung size less, muscle mass less, things like that. We will make it less, but we will not bring it down to that level of a female, born female. Okay, so transgender men, and that would be female to male, those who have undergone female puberty experience lower muscle mass and strength compared to cisgender men. So testosterone therapy can increase muscle mass and strength, but they may still face disadvantages in high contact or high strength sports. So kind of in contrast to what we just talked about, even with hormone therapy and the introduction of testosterone therapy, even though we can see an increase in muscle mass and strength, it's just not going to raise to the level of muscle mass and strength that a born male who went through puberty has developed. So I don't know that we're ever going to quite level that. It doesn't sound like it, but it's certainly, there is certainly an impact, I believe, on our transgender athletes. And I think we can all agree on that. So let's look at the debate and the policy of transgender athletes. So certainly there's a huge debate out there about fairness in sports. And the primary debate focuses on whether transgender athletes hold an unfair advantage over their cisgender counterparts. Well, we talked about it a little bit when we try to level that playing field with hormone therapy. Are we able to level it? And even if we do level the playing field in regard to testosterone levels, which is what they're measuring for competition, if we can level the playing field with testosterone levels, do we not still leave out of that equation that a male who went through puberty, that trans to female, still has probably larger lung capacity, bigger heart capacity, larger, more dense bones and limbs, better muscle mass with less body fat? All of these things are certainly going to affect performance. So many sports organizations regulate eligibility based on testosterone levels. So that's some of the current policies. So they really can't. They have to find something that, how do we level the playing field? How do we say, yes, this person is eligible to compete? And how do we do that? And the way they're trying to do that now is through testosterone levels. But like I just said, even if we level the playing field with testosterone, did we level the playing field with the other physical aspects of the human body? So ongoing research. So scientists continue to study the effects of hormone therapy and its long-term impact on athletic performance. I don't know. Long-term hormone therapy, will it eventually help raise, and will it change internal body structure? Will it help create more dense bones? Will it be like a puberty that was made by man? I guess. I don't know how other way to say it. Would it be like a puberty made by man to help try to level the playing fields? All good questions. Certainly I don't have the answers, but I do want to know as much about the topic as I can before I talk about the topic. So let's look at a case study. We're going to talk about Leah Thomas. Now, this particular case study and this information was actually aired back in December of 2022 on CBS Sunday Morning. So you can always go back and look at this and see the report. You can also look up the case study. It's Dr. Michael Joyner from the Mayo Clinic that actually was interviewed and worked on this. So in this case study, or in our little case study, I will give you just a glimpse, just a little excerpts of what actually this whole story was about. So Dr. Joyner has studied human athletic performance and transgender athletes. He states that men typically perform 10 to 20% better than women in many sports. Leah Thomas is a transgender swimmer. Previously, Leah competed on the University of Pennsylvania's men's team before transitioning and now competing in the women's category. While her testosterone levels were suppressed, her times showed a statistical advantage over cisgender female competitors. Joyner notes that hormone therapy reduces some male advantages, but doesn't fully erase them, especially when it comes to height, lung capacity, and muscle memory and muscle mass. So interestingly, if you do a little checking, Leah Thomas actually has competed in events, swimming events, against female competitors where she has actually finished the race and is waiting for her competition to finish. Now in swimming, a sport where hundredths of a second can make the difference on a win or a loss, we're talking significant time differences. So clearly there's something there. And I'm not taking away from the fact that Leah Thomas is probably a very, very accomplished swimmer. But does Leah Thomas have some advantages because of the testosterone levels pre and during puberty level development that'll never go away? Great question. So transgender athletes in competition. I did a little research, and according to outsports.com, December 6th, 2024 posting, at least 25 transgender athletes have won regional, national, or international titles in women's sports. These sports include weightlifting, cycling, sprinting, swimming, skiing. So the question remains, do these athletes have an unfair advantage? We're talking about muscle mass, muscle density, bone density, the strength of the bones and the muscles, and then we talk about a competition such as weightlifting. Even bringing those testosterone levels down with hormone therapy, was it enough to make a level playing field for a female-born female in a weightlifting competition against a transgender male to female athlete? Great question. What about cycling? We talked about heart and lung capacity. Not only that, but think about your length, the stride of the pedaling, heart and lung capacity. That would make sense, along with sprinting, along with swimming, and even along with skiing, something that I used to do. I used to be a competitive ski racer. Back in the day, up in Wyoming, not in Arizona. We don't get enough snow. But again, those questions remain. Do these athletes have an unfair advantage? It's the question. So transgender and gender identity have really become a hot topic, something that everybody's talking about, and we see it starting to develop and really starting to raise questions at a very, very young ages in some children. Certainly pre-puberty children, we have seen reports through the media, we see it at our schools, children that are now identifying, males identifying as females and vice versa, females identifying as males. So where do we fit into that? This is pre-puberty, people. These are children. So there's some questions that I think we need to ask. But let's talk about the actual transformation. So really, for children identifying as transgender, the focus really is more on a social affirmation rather than a medical intervention before puberty. So it's really a social thing more than it's a medical thing before puberty. I don't think there's too many doctors out there that are going to perform transgender medical procedures prior to puberty. But in that social transition, we are talking about things like changing names, using pronouns, changing our clothing, hairstyles, and trying to match the gender identity that we're striving for. So how does that affect us too? During that social transition, we really need to be creating a supportive environment for the child. So certainly the children's friends are going to be supportive. Not all other children are going to be supportive, but the friends will. And the friends will encourage that and be supportive in that environment. Parents may or may not be socially supportive in that environment. What we've seen in the media, there's been a lot of talk about the teachers. I know there was a lot down in Florida and other school districts around the United States where, do we put in transgender restrooms for children? Do we allow children to identify as transgender like that? Do we encourage it? Do we embrace it? How do we handle it? And so these are things that we're all still learning. But I the one piece of opinion that I'll throw in my podcast, which I try not to do, but I'm going to, is I really, really, truly believe that a child that wants to experience or maybe explore the transgender lifestyle and they start through that social affirmation and that social transition, this really needs to be handled by the parents. Don't allow other children to influence them because they will listen to their friends. Don't let social media be the influencer. We all know that social media, I can hide behind the camera Well, actually, in a lot of social media, there's not even a camera. They are just putting out words, and they can hide behind their words and say whatever they want and not worry about how that's going to affect the other person. And that's really scary. And really and truly, do teachers have any authority or any right to really get involved in a child's growth at that level and to that impact of looking at being a transgender person? So I don't know. I believe the parents. It has to start with the parents, has to end with the parents. Children, I don't know. Are they ready to make those decisions? So let's go to the second part of this is the medical interventions. So puberty blockers are typically delayed until puberty begins. So puberty blockers typically delayed until puberty begins. Again, we're still talking about very young individuals. We're talking about adolescents going into puberty and using puberty blockers. Certainly, this needs to be researched, understood, and talked about by the parents, by the student, by the child, by the medical staff. We have to talk about this, folks. Hormone therapy and gender-affirming surgeries are not recommended before age 18. I don't believe that there are too many physicians out there that will even touch hormone therapy or any type of gender-affirming surgery on a child. And they definitely shouldn't, and nor should a parent ever allow that, in my opinion. There it is. Opinions again. But I believe in protecting our children. So mental health support plays a crucial role in helping children and families navigate gender identity. And this is something I really, really strongly believe in. You really, really need to talk about it, research it, reach out for mental health support, and really formulate educated decisions, educated conversations before just jumping on a bandwagon. Talk about it, learn about it, and make sure that this is what you want to do. Because this really brings up the question, should a pre-puberty child be making a decision about transitioning? Does a child have that right pre-puberty? Do they have the cognitive development to fully understand the long-term implications? I don't know. And who is influencing these decisions? And I brought that up a minute ago. Parents, teachers, peers. Be careful. Be careful about what happens on social media. Be careful about how teachers or other adults outside of your family might be influencing you. And certainly be careful about what your friends are telling you. Listen to your parents. Do the research. Learn. That's my advice. Be smart about decisions like this. So these are really interesting questions. Well, as we talk about transgender and how it's affecting athletes and how it's affecting us socially and physically, let's look at it at a broader, let's go move back and look at a broader focus on it. Let's look at the global perspectives on transgender issues. I like to talk about here in the US, here in America, how things are handled. But the views on transgender individuals vary widely across the world. There's a lot of variations. For example, in my research, I found that in Western and Northern Europe, generally you see support for transgender rights and protections. In the Middle Eastern and parts of Africa, you see more restrictive laws and attitudes, with some countries actually criminalizing transgender identity. So when you come back to the US, our policies on transgender athletes specifically and youth really vary by state by state and by governing bodies. Who's the governing body of that, the sanctioned body of that sports team or group or I'm at a loss here. For instance, the Olympic Committee has their bodies, their governing bodies, Little League, places like that. So those policies on transgender athletes and the youth really kind of vary. I don't think there's anything set in stone. I think there's a lot of research that needs to be done yet. So anyway, we talked about a lot. We talked about, is there a difference between men and women? Can we close the gap of the difference between men and women through, gender therapies, hormone therapies, things like that? Can we close that gap? And if we close the gap, do certain advantages still exist? And we talked then a little bit too about case studies of some of the athletes and what's happened, and where we see transgender athletes really dominating sports. And like I said, weightlifting, cycling, sprinting, swimming, skiing, all these type of sports where you really see a domination by the transgender athletes. And then we tried to take a look back at globally and what do we see, and we know that in the Western countries and Northern European countries, we really do see that people try to understand transgender and transgender identity. People try to understand it. People try to support and generally support one another and the rights of all people. We see that. Whereas in other countries, we don't see that. We see actually the criminalization of certain gender identity topics. So very, very interesting topic. So what do you think? What do you think? Do transgender athletes have an unfair advantage in women's sports? These are men that are transitioning to females. And what about on the other side, the female transitioning to male gender athletes? I really don't hear a lot about that, it seems like. But certainly from what we've talked about and the research that I've done, it seems certainly there would be differences and certainly disadvantages in that case. And also, should children be able to make irreversible decisions about gender identity before adulthood? Should our children be able to do that? And should our parents support children that want to make, and I use the term irreversible decisions about gender identity before adulthood? I don't claim to have all the answers, just here to ask the questions. But I'll say this, before forming a stance, before getting on that soapbox, do your research. I encourage you to think critically. Don't just jump on that bandwagon, but make an informed decision based on knowledge. Knowledge is power. Learn as much about your topic as you can, and then we'll talk about it. We'll have good, informed, knowledgeable, educated discussions about these topics. So as always, thank you for tuning in. Please be kind to one another. And always stay curious, because that is how we learn and that is how we grow. Stay curious. So until next time, everyone, this is Joe signing off from Joe's Hot Takes 25. Have a wonderful day.